Hello and welcome to another Brawl video. Today we're taking a look at an updated version of the 5-color Slivers archetype, which received a new commander we get to play with, as Sliver Overlord has been reprinted as one of the special guests in Edge of Eternities. This 5-mana 7/7 says we can activate it for 3 mana to search our library for any Sliver card, reveal it and put it into our hand. Can also activate it for 3 mana to gain control of target Sliver, although that's not going to come up very often. Maybe the opponent is playing some changelings we can steal. Of course, in the mirror match, it's going to be incredibly useful. And then occasionally you can steal your own Slivers back if the opponent somehow reanimated them or stole them. So that can still potentially come up. But we're mostly going to be focusing on the first activated ability to tutor up whatever Sliver we want. There's a ton of different Slivers granting different keywords in the deck we can find. So then it doesn't take too many activations to assemble a lethal army of Slivers to take over the game. So then if we take a look at our deck breakdown, it's pretty straightforward. We've got a lot of ramp cards since we want to accelerate our mana, so we can cast our commander and ideally activate it in the same turn it comes down, and then plenty of Slivers we can play in the meantime that we can eventually find with the activated ability, and then a small miscellaneous section with more cards that can synergize with our commander or that play well with our Sliver theme, and then a few removal spells sprinkled in. So that's our rough breakdown. Now for the deep dive, starting with our ramp section. At 0 mana, we can maybe imprint a card for Chrome Mox. And then at 1 mana, we've got Birds of Paradise and Delighted Halfling, as they can potentially fix for multiple colors. And then at 2 mana, Bloom Tender can also be quite exciting if we can untap with it, especially with the Overlord in play, because then it can tap for 5 mana, making it easier to immediately activate our commander when it comes down. And same can be said for the Faebro Elder, which is a slightly bigger version with a similar ability. Then we can also ramp by putting additional lands into play. Explore lets us draw a card, and we can play an extra land for a turn. And very similar is Growth Spiral, which we can play at instant speed. We also have both Into the North and Rampant Growth, as we have snow-covered basics we can find with either of them. And then Farseek, also a relatively recent addition, can find both dual lands and tri-lands, so even better than Into the North or Rampant Growth in this particular deck. Then we also have Fanatic of Voronos as another mana creature, as we'll likely end up with a 4-powered creature, so it can make 4 mana, so once again can help us immediately activate the Overlord. And then we also have Planar Genesis as kind of a worse Growth Spiral. And then some 2-mana ramp artifacts that can also produce multiple colors, Arcane Signet, Cold Steel Heart, and Solar Transformer. Then continuing with our ramp at 3 mana, there's the Ancient Cornucopia, which can also gain a ton of life in the meantime. There's Cultivate to find our remaining basics. Then Patchwork Banner can give our Slivers +1/+1 and make a mana of any color. Urza's Incubator can discount all Slivers by 2. Now this also affects the opponent's Slivers, so I have to be careful in the mirror match. But yeah, this is not going to necessarily impact the Sliver Overlord the first time we cast it, but it can maybe cover the commander tax in future turns, and then still helpful in, of course, deploying our other Slivers. There's the Cartographer's Survey, finding 2 lands. There's Omen Path Journey, which can find multiple lands over the course of several turns. Then Mirari's Wake is also very good with all those ramp cards putting additional lands into play, as they can now produce 2 mana in addition to pumping the team. Timeless Lotus can also be very good at helping us double spell, so we can cast Overlord and immediately activate it. Primeval Titan can find 2 lands, including some of our utility lands like Sliver Hive, and Chromatic Orrery can also make mana or draw a bunch of cards, so that also plays well with a 5-color commander. So that's our ramp section taken care of, although we do still have a Sliver that can make a mana, and this is one of the better ones. Mana Weft Sliver helps our Slivers tap to add 1 mana of any color, so this is also very useful, and sometimes a Sliver we actively want to search up with the Sliver Overlord. And then at 1 mana we've got Striking Sliver for First Strike, Sentinel Sliver for Vigilance. Diffusion Sliver essentially gives a ward 2 before a ward even existed. And Dragscape Sliver gives our Slivers Unearth 2, so we can bring them back out of the graveyard temporarily. Leeching Sliver makes the opponent lose 1 life when a Sliver attacks, so that can also add up. Bladeback Sliver can let our creatures tap to deal 1 damage to a player or planeswalker if we're empty-handed. Then we mentioned Mana Weft. Predatory gives our Slivers +1/+1. Cloud Shredder, another MVP that we're often going to search up, giving the team both flying and haste. There's Steel Form for 1 additional toughness. Belligerent for menace. Blur Sliver, another way to give the team haste. Hollowhead can let our creatures tap to discard and draw to help us loot. Spiteful Sliver can help us redirect some damage. Realmwalker is the only changeling in our deck, so also counts as a sliver we can search up and then helps us play slivers off the top of the deck. Tempered Sliver can give us additional +1 counters if we connect. Lava Belly can deal 1 and gain 1 when a sliver enters. Bone Scythe for double strike is another solid one. There's Cleaving Sliver giving 2 additional power. Then the first Sliver's Chosen gives all creatures Exalted, so if a creature attacks alone, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn for each sliver we control, so that can also now get out of hand. And then we've got some other 5-colored slivers that we could also substitute as a commander if we're maybe getting tired of Sliver Overlord. The Hive Lord gives our team Indestructible, and then the first sliver gives our slivers Cascade, so that can also accumulate a ton of value, especially if we start cascading into slivers, which then cascade into even more slivers, and things can get out of hand. And then our miscellaneous section has a few removal spells at 1 mana, Swords to Plowshares, Lightning Bolt, and Fatal Push we can also enable with our fetch lands. Training Grounds is also tailor-made for the Sliver Overlord, as we can discount the activated abilities by 2 mana, so now it's only a single mana to search up whatever sliver we want. Intruder Alarm can also combo off with the Sliver Overlord, especially when paired with Mana Weft Sliver, since now all creatures can tap for mana. We can search up another creature, put it on the battlefield, untap the team, which can now once again tap for a bunch of mana, and before you know it, you've got all slivers on the battlefield. And then Black Market Connections can also help us draw, make treasures, and make shapeshifters, which also count as slivers. There's Binding, has another removal spell that can help ramp on the second chapter. And last but not least, Thrumming Hivepool, the only sliver-related card that's actually printed in Edge of Eternities itself, has affinity for slivers, so we can routinely cast it at a discount. And then slivers we control have both double strike and haste, and at the beginning of our upkeep we get to make a pair of 1/1 colorless sliver creature tokens, which will also have those 2 abilities, so this can also be incredibly powerful. And then the mana base is split up into 1 of each snow-covered basic that we can find with our various search effects. We also have 1 of each of the shock lands that can enter untapped at the cost of 2 life, as well as 1 of each of the slow lands, which enter untapped if we have enough other lands in play. And then I've also got the New Capenna Tri-lands, which we can also find with our various fetch lands, which is the next category. And then some of our utility lands include Cavern of Souls, can be very important against blue counter spells, making our slivers uncounterable. We also have Sliver Hive that can be activated to make a 1/1 sliver token, so that can also be useful if the game drags out. And then of course Command Tower, as any proper commander deck would play. So yeah, that's our deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Okay, we're on the play, facing Imskir, black-red artifact. This hand is missing green mana, so can keep. This hand has 0 ramp, and also not the most exciting slivers. Alright, this I can try. Would like to keep the Hive Pool to see it in action, so maybe we ditch one of our 2-drops. Can get a Swamp to set up Binding. Turn 1 Ashnod into Tormod Script, so no graveyard shenanigans allowed. So Binding going after the Mechanist at the moment. Although we'll see if they have anything scarier coming up. Bowman Courier. Can eventually draw them some cards. I guess the fact that this is an artifact also makes it more valuable for their commander. So I'm down to take that one out first. And then I might want to get a dual land. Because I might get myself into trouble if I get too many basics. Courier down. Mostly care about Chapter 2 helping us ramp. Although the question is, do we want to play Overlord when we can't immediately activate it? since our opponent could easily have removal for it. Although it's maybe still worth a try. Take one. And a Steel Overseer cast through Phyrexian Tower. Alright, so that can amp up the pressure. We'll get a Tri-land. And then make sure we have the right colors. But yeah, with the island, I guess we can still play the Overlord. Don't want to take too much damage from my shock lands if I can help it. And then next turn we could maybe unload the rest of our hand. A Lava Belly makes this cost 4. Or we could look into activating the Overlord first. Alright, never mind. Opponent had to go for the throat. That's too bad. So now it's gonna take a while to get the Overlord going again. Could die in the meantime to the Steel Overseer. Maybe start with a Hive Pool. Training Grounds isn't bad either. But yeah, I think I just play Hive Pool, tapped Overgrown Tomb. Don't need to shock myself to play it right now. And then next turn we'll get a pair of 1/1 Slivers. Slivers have Double Strike and Haste. So yeah, that can present lethal pretty quickly. Opponent's got more Graveyard Hate. And a Sliver Hive. So if I play Training Grounds, 5, 6, 7, I can still cast my commander but not activate it. So maybe the plan is this turn just go Lava Belly plus Training Grounds, chump with the tokens, and then next turn I can Overlord immediately activate it. Which, at least if they have more removal for it, lets us pull ahead. Could also activate the Sliver Hive for 5 to make an extra blocker. But I think I'm down to just play the Lava Belly. And then the Lava Belly itself is fine to attack. Could of course also try and double or triple block. Opponent's got a Grim Bauble. Can take out one of our Slivers. Goes for the Lava Belly after all. 1 card left in hand, and they can also play a pretty cheap Imskir. Okay. Overseer activates, so we can jump. And then wouldn't mind drawing another land so I can activate Overlord twice. Yeah, the Hive Pool's quite impressive in this deck. And we don't even play it at a discount. Okay, don't mind if I do. So Overlord could attack. So if I attack all out, I guess they're forced to chump the Overlord. But that's a bit risky, so just get in with Overlord. And then I can activate it once. Alternative was to play Mana Weft first. And then I could have activated Overlords 2 or 3 times after jumping with my Slivers. So that also could have been worth it. The One Ring will protect our opponents, so now we don't quite have a lethal next turn. I don't think there's a Sliver that prevents protection effects from taking place. But I can double check. All-out attack. Yeah, I could double block Steel Overseer, I guess, and then chump, take 5. Maybe a bit risky if Imskir just burns us to death. Alright, fine. So what's the best I can do here? Maybe the first sliver, so we can start cascading. So cast this one first. Find double strike. Cascade once we play Mana Weft. And then I can still activate Overlord a bunch. Alright, so it's to Plowshares. Could consider exiling my own creature just to gain life. Not an intuitive play to make. Could also just go for Imskir and then they can't activate it as easily. Probably makes more sense. Alright, anything else I want to get right now? So just double checking that there's nothing that says damage cannot be prevented, but I doubt it. Yeah, so then Diffusion Sliver could make sense. Could get the Hive Lord. Can I still cast it without tapping too many creatures? Yeah, I guess that's reasonable. I'll be able to cascade, likely hit another Sliver. And then we have 2 blockers at the very least. Right, Bloom Tender is not going to be indestructible. Pass a turn. So they have 1 turn to deal 10 damage here without Imskir on the battlefield. Or they need a very specific board wipe. Maybe a Toxic Deluge, paying 7 life, but then they could still die to the Hive Pool. So their opponent goes digging with the One Ring. Finds a Weapons Manufacturing, could have been scarier if they played it sooner. And a Vat of Rebirth is next. Make a token with the Manufacturing. And a cut down. Alright, so they seem dead. Can turn our team sideways. So yeah, quite impressed by the Hive Pool. Can still tap my 2 slivers to search up additional threats with Overlord, but that's not going to be necessary. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, facing Saruman of many colors, so an Esper control deck. We've got a Keeper, 2 cheap ramp cards, a Banner, and Predatory Sliver. Our deck doesn't mind playing a long game once we can deploy our commander and activate it a few times. Ancient Tomb on 1, into an Iron Crag, yeah, that's a nice start. Still only colorless mana, but yeah, pretty good for any artifact deck especially. So now we can decide which 2-drop we want to lead with. Maybe for now Explore. And then next turn I can Banner into Farseek. Opponent's gonna take an extra turn already. Just to hit an extra land drop. So it's kind of like casting an Explorer. Except our opponent now has a God Pharaoh statue. Making everything cost 2 more. That's rough. And yeah. I guess I'll start with Farseek. Good thing our hand is all ramp. So next, I guess play Banner, may get countered since they didn't deploy their commander, but I guess they're also just missing black. Name Sliver. Just gonna keep building up my mana. Don't see the benefit in playing Overlord when it can easily get answered. So I can Cold Steel and then still Spiral in the opponent's turn. Okay. Well, for an early statue, we're still managing okay. And there's Cavern into Saruman. So when they cast their second spell, they can mill me for 2. And then potentially steal some of our instant sorceries or enchantments, which we don't have much in the deck. That resolves. So do we have enough mana to Overlord activate? Looks like it. Now if I Cascade, I guess my spells are still taxed by 2. So getting the Cascade Sliver is not that useful. So I might want to get the Hive Lord for Indestructible. Especially now that you already got rid of their exile effects. Back to the command zone. Intruder Alarm can help us go off with Overlord, but that's gonna take a second to set up. I guess Intruder with Mana Weft is the real combo. But for now, maybe Hive Lord, let's see. Only leaves 3 mana, so not enough to do anything else. Yeah, I'll still play the Hive Lord. See if that can stave off an attack. And then once we play Mana Weft, it's going to be easier to play the rest of our hand out. Paragon into Signet. Opponent milled Land Fatal Push. And our opponent is just going to Farseek here. So that can maybe get a Swamp, which can unlock more cards in their hand. So still pretty good. Anything else? Alright, find my own swords. Could swords Saruman, ditching Intruder Alarm, but that's still a big commitment. And I can maybe put Intruder Alarm to use. So what's the ideal sequencing here? I mean, yeah, the statue makes things 10 times more difficult, so I don't know if it actually helps me all that much. So yeah, let's start by attacking. Opponent jumps. Play Alarm. Into Mana Weft. Opponent's gonna reanimate Paragon. Celestus to double spell with Saruman. Also good reason not to swords, as Saruman could eventually get the swords back to answer the Hive Lord. It's gonna play an Genesis and first Sliver in the graveyard. Can still maybe unearth it, but I wouldn't be able to search it up. And a Crab Abomination. Oof, if that hits swords, I'll be sad. Alright, hit a Sliver. So we can eventually steal those back with Overlord. Alright, let's see if we can maybe combo off a little bit. Cast Overlord. And we get to untap. So now I can tap these. I guess I'll still be a little bit short of actually searching up the Flying and Haste and casting it. So for now, I could just hit for 6. Or I can steal my Belligerent Sliver back first. Otherwise I would just jump with it. And then now Hivelord could attack. Or I can just pass and plan to activate Overlord in the opponent's turn. It's probably better. Celestus activates, so they're getting desperate. Yeah, Day of Judgment does not work against the Hivelord. So Indestructible making the difference. And now a dig through time, so they could still find another answer, like maybe a Toxic Deluge would be bad for me. Make sure to activate Overlord's end of turn. And then we should be able to close it out next turn. Yeah, without the statue, the Intruder Alarm would be a lot more exciting. Rusco is acceptable. Yeah, keeping swords in hand is probably the safest place for it to be, as they can't steal it with Saruman. So our opponent's gonna Growth Spiral. Rusco enters. Maybe should have activated Overlord before they milled me for 2, in case they milled the Sliver I wanted to get. But again, we can always get to Unearth as well, and if they mill my Unearth Sliver, I can bring it back out of the graveyard. So gets flying with Cloud Shredder. Opponent's at 13. Our team has Menace as well. I guess they could still have a counterspell in hand. Now Hivepool also gives haste. So tap these for mana. Cast Cloud Shredder. And yeah, opponent scoops it up. I would get to untap my team, and now we're actually starting to produce extra mana with every Sliver we cast, since we can untap our entire team with the Intruder Alarm, tap them for mana, get another Sliver, and that's how we can eventually put our entire library onto the battlefield pretty much, and attack for lethal. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, facing Pantlaza, dinosaurs. Our hand seems reasonable, got quite a bit of ramp, 1 Sliver. Could start with Rockfall Veil if we want to Farseek turn 2. Could also Signet first, but Signet we can immediately tap, whereas the land from Farseek enters tapped. So it seems worth it to take 2 damage, although now with Halfling we can go Signet plus Halfling, which ramps us a little bit more. So next turn I could already play my commander. Sliver Overlord. Opponent passes. Yeah, I'm kind of down to just run out my commander. It's uncounterable. And next turn I can start activating it to find additional slivers. And there's Pantlaza. Let's see what they can discover. It's gonna be the Vantasaur. So I can either find Naturalize or Savage Stomp. Okay. So with that in mind, is there one particular sliver I want to find? Could get to one that makes mana, but then our opponent can take it out with a stomp. So maybe I go for another expensive sliver and then keep on ramping for now. Can activate this at instant speed. So yeah, I guess I'll just Farseek and get a Tri-land. And then just pass with the Overlord's ability available. Maybe we can get the indestructible sliver here to protect our team. As our opponent finds Thunderherd Migration, revealing the Armasaur. Pretty good against our Overlord, actually. And so now Savage Stomp would result in a trade. Fair enough. So I can still get the Hive Lord for indestructible. Could get the first sliver. Or we can go smaller with like a mana weft, making it easier to redeploy my commander. Maybe we still go for Cascade. A 7/7 still blocks pretty well. Take 8. So we want to cast this using the Halfling. Find an Omen Path Journey for additional ramp. We'll just get a bunch of Tri-lands. Maybe a Sliver Hive. And then I can still cast a Hollowhead Sliver. Cascades into the Leeching Sliver, which cascades into a Lightning Bolt. Take out your Paradise Druid. So now all our slivers can also tap to discard and draw. Ooh, a Tally, that's scary. Might be able to find a sliver, but then we can maybe steal it back with our commander's ability. Ooh, Mirari's Wake, that's quite a good one. And then Awakening Sun's Avatar. Can destroy our team. That's a problem. So I need to get the Indestructible Sliver, but I'm probably not going to have the mana to cast it, because I still need to find it for 3 mana, so that's not happening. So maybe I'm better off going with Chromatic Orrery. But yeah, this is just going to end the game. Destroy all non-dinosaurs, and then the dinosaurs attack and I lose. So my only hope is to maybe get lucky with a Cascade. What could I even find that saves me? I guess we'll find out. Probably want to tap the Halfling. Find a Blur Sliver for haste. And the Mana Weft, so now my slivers can tap for mana. And a Training Grounds, alright, so we're kind of doing it here. So I might be able to just win if I find the Flying Sliver, although I guess they have a reach creature as well. So then I don't think we'll necessarily have lethal. Opponent loses 1 for each attacking sliver, so they're at 18, 1 blocker, and then 10, 13... Yeah, I think we're going to be a little bit shy of lethal, but I can activate my Overlord. and get the indestructible one, which for now should save me. So yeah, the flying sliver is Cloud Shredder, flying and haste. And get a basic. Play Hivelord. Cascade. And then I guess I'll play another sliver here. So we have Vigilance. Hit a Fatal Push. Take out your Raptor. I guess we have enabled Revolt, so I could go for the Ventosaur as well, since we used the fetch lane. Alright, so it's free to attack since we have Vigilance and Indestructible. Get a bunch of triggers. And more importantly, we don't just lose to the Awakening Sun's avatar now. Can still activate the Overlords a bunch of times, but I also want to leave blockers back, so... I can maybe afford to tap the Sentinel Sliver to make a mana, to activate my Overlord again. Is there a sliver that pings for one that I maybe haven't thought about? To target player or planeswalker. Yeah, I guess I could have gotten something else before attacking, but then I would have had to tap a bunch of creatures. So I think we're fine for now. Could get something impactful like Double Strike for next turn. And then just pass. Alright, let's see if our opponent can pull it off. They do have a million mana thanks to Mirari's Wake. But even a transformed Etali we can block. Armasaur is going to punish me for activating the Overlord going forward. But I don't think we need to activate it too many more times. Alright, so getting to draw for each dinosaur they control. Pretty decent when you've got all the mana in the world. Now if they can exile my Sliver Hivelords and then cast the Awakening Suns, we could still die. So yeah, both decks kind of using the Cascade mechanic in one way or another. I guess we have to watch out for Galtan Mavren making a large dinosaur that's also attacking. They will just transform Etali. So I have to block that one. And they get a 13 power Trampler. So I might still be dead here. Maybe should have left an extra blocker back. So this is the most damage I can prevent. But I think we're still taking a lethal trample. And there's nothing I can really do about it. Other than, I guess, looting with the Hollowhead's ability, hoping to find a Swords to Plowshares. I guess it's worth a try. So discard and draw. Opponent draws as well, but they're tapped out. That's not a Swords. Last chance, and that's just a Bloom Tender. Alright, I think we're dead. Yeah, close one. GG's. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing the 5-color Eldrazi, so Eldrazi versus Slivers. We've got all 5-color Slivers in hand here, not really where you want to start without any ramp, so I'm gonna have to mulligan. This is not a huge improvement. unless we find an untapped land here. Then it could work out if we can play Bloom Tender turn 2. Otherwise, we're gonna be a little slow. Opponent surveils. Now Faber Elder, so we are playing a turn behind, but we still have a decent amount of ramp to maybe catch back up. Alright, so now I could go for Fabero, which immediately makes 2 mana, as opposed to Bloom Tender, which initially only makes 1. Still missing black mana to get the connections online, but we can maybe use Banner to fix. Opponent's got the Power Stone, so they're also ramping nicely. Alright, so I can double spell Banner plus Connections, or Banner plus Cornucopia, or Banner plus Bloom Tender. Bloom Tender is maybe a bit weaker in the face of a board wipe, but it does give us more mana next turn if it does survive. So we'll attack for 2 first. Yeah, let's try it. Going for Cornucopia first also made sense, so we gain more life. Opponent explores. So they can't quite play their commander yet. It's possible they're sandbagging a board wipe, and they're waiting for a few more creatures before they cast it. So we'll have to keep that in mind. Otherwise, it would make sense to cast the Overlord and get a black source, could just be basic swamp. Cast Overlord, see if that resolves, because they could have access to blue mana for counter spells. Alright, so this can now make 5 mana. Could immediately search up the Indestructible effect, although that may not be good enough against what our opponent is doing. So before we move to attackers, I'll play a few more things out in case I have instant speed removal for the Overlord. So then now I can play Connections, attack, and then I can still maybe play the Hive Pool second main. Could also, I suppose, just play the Hive Pool now, so I can attack with my double striking hasty Overlord. Probably makes more sense. Alright, hit you for 16. And now even if there is a board wipe, it's not the end of the world, as we'll get 2 more tokens next turn. The token from Connections also counts as a Sliver, thanks to the Changeling ability. So that's another 3/2 double strike and haste. And then with the mana from Fabero and Bloom Tender, we can search up whatever slivers we want as well, assuming they're still alive. Worst case scenario here is something like a River's Rebuke, but that's double blue and they didn't search up a ton of blue mana. So we'll see. Can they cast some huge Eldrazi perhaps? With a Dark Ritual, I guess they could. Kozilek, Broken Reality. That's still beatable. So we put down our Bone Scythe Sliver. So yeah, that's some big creatures. But now I can just search up a flyer if I'd like. So anything else from our opponents? Or do we get to untap? A Leyline Binding, okay. Goes for the Thrumming Hive Pool, makes sense. Turns out we have another double strike effect. So that's 4 mana to turn it face up. But we can also just activate here. So let me tap Bloom Tender. If we want to play it safe, maybe start by getting Diffusion Sliver, so we don't have to worry about any instant speed answers from our opponents. And then I can get a Sliver that grants flying, as well as haste. Can play it. GG's. And then go to attackers. And then after attacking, I could even turn this face up if I'd like. And that should do it. Sweet. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw here, facing Kotis, which is going to try to steal a bunch of our cards. At least if they steal our slivers, we can steal them back with Overlord. So, this isn't a worst hand. Turn 2, Leeching. And then turn 3, Cultivate. Hardened Scales is interesting. Don't really expect a +1 counter deck here, but... Alright, now we can explore. Can probably just get a Plains. And then fetch a tap tri-land. Now Fight Rigging goes with the Hardened Scales to give them more +1 counters. Now we can also potentially make our slivers indestructible to compete with Kotis. Let's get a blue tri-land. Fatal Push is not gonna do a whole lot for me. But yeah, we can cultivate. And pass with maybe Revolted Fatal Push available, but more likely just get a tap tri-land. And then, yeah, we could already play the Overlord, although our opponents could remove it before we get a chance to activate. Opponent does keep up a blue. Maybe, I guess they were just missing 4 mana to cast their commander, or they could be keeping up Wash Away to counter our Overlord for 1 mana. So in that case I would much prefer playing the Hive Pool, or maybe Bloom Tender plus a couple slivers. Fatal Push a good answer to the Wolf. Yeah, let's go Bloom Tender, Steel Form, keep up push. And then if they target the Wolf with more +1 counters, we can take it out. And then now we can play Overlord. Bloom Tender immediately makes 5 mana, so we can search up some other slivers. Innkeeper's Talent, more +1 counter synergy. And then I guess it doesn't matter if we wait for the triggers here. That works, so no free spell of Fight Rigging. But our opponent shuts down the Bloom Tender, so no 5 additional mana. So if I go for Overlord, once again I can't activate it, so I think I prefer Leeching into Hive Pool. And then next turn I can play Overlords, immediately attack thanks to haste, and also activate. It's going to be a lot more impactful. And yeah, the pressure is adding up. Opponent says good game, maybe just missing their land drops here. I'll take it. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Tannuk, so our opponent's going to be cheating some huge cards into play using the Warp ability. So it's not going to be easy. We do have a decent amount of ramp, and that's about it. I mean, ramping out Overlord is maybe not a bad way to go about it. As a 7/7, it's not too easy for a red to remove. And then once we untap with it, having a lot of mana helps us sink mana into the activation to find more slivers. So we'll start with a tapped green source. Turn 2. Could risk it on Planar Genesis, but I've been burnt by it before. Can just go for a Cold Steel Heart. then next turn we can double spell Cornucopia with a 2-drop. Opponent with the same start, but next turn they can already cast their commander. I guess I keep up Planar Genesis to represent a counter spell, and then maybe they'll respect it. Keep them guessing. Maybe slow them down by a turn, since we are representing double blue, but yeah, opponent eventually still goes for it. Alright, so that gambit didn't quite work out. And put in Garden, I think. So I can cast Overlord and play Transformer. And then hope that they don't have anything too crazy to cheat out with Tannuk. Fabura would immediately be a 5/5. So what's it gonna be? Moment of Truth. Strike Master with haste can immediately make mana. And then the real finisher, they either don't have it or they have multiple options. Riders of the Mark. 7/4, trample haste. Return it. Make a number of tokens. Alright, could have been worse. I'll take 7. So I guess they can decide to put it in hand as opposed to exile. And make 4 1/1s. Okay, now Overlord can activate. And I could even get the indestructible Sliver, which is probably the safest. So now I can block, and they can't mess with my permanents as much. Still gain 5. So now that we have our defenses established, I can look for other slivers that can help close out the game. Step 1 Iron Crag. Still potentially vulnerable in the air, as our opponent plays Perforos, which is very similar to Tannuk, so it's kind of a redundant enabler, not really a payoff. Alright, so far so good. So this can add 2 power. So let's go searching. Flying, of course, is going to be useful. So I could immediately get Cloud Shredder. Not quite enough mana to also get Vigilance, which would also be decent here. Do we maybe get Vigilance first? Or I can just Cascade, and that's maybe more fun. Alright, fine, let's Cascade, gain 5. And then next turn we can maybe get what we're looking for. And then do I feel comfortable attacking? They can just jump with a 1/1, so it's probably not worth it. So next turn I can get the Flying Sliver and play Cleaving Sliver. So that should be enough. Perforos is online, also indestructible. But let's go Cleaving first. We know we're going to get a multicolored Sliver, so I don't need to gain life right now. Hit a Birds of Paradise, not the most exciting hit. A lot more fun when you can Cascade into a Sliver and then Cascade into something else afterwards. But yeah, this is the inevitability of Sliver Overlord once you have a lot of mana. Get Cloud Shredder. And yeah, that should just end the game, giving the team flying. So we got to see this updated 5-color Slivers deck in action. And yeah, the Brawl queue is pretty ruthless nowadays, so it's not always easy to play a 5-mana commander that doesn't have an immediate impact when you play it, which is why it's often better to play the Overlord once you have enough mana to at least activate it once to get a bit of value out of it. Otherwise, you could also play the other 5-mana slivers like the Hive Lord for built-in and indestructible, or you can get the Cascade Sliver, which is also guaranteed to provide immediate value. So the Overlord may not be the most most powerful commander you can choose for this archetype, but if you do get to untap with it with a bunch of mana, it can easily take over a game. So yeah, that's gonna do it for today's gameplay. Wanna thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.